What happens when the brightest stage lights suddenly feel distant, when applause fades, not with noise but with silence? Today's story is not about scandal headlines or dramatic accusations. It is about absence, pressure, and the quiet weight that follows those who once stood at the center of attention. In the shadow of Wu Monglung's passing, three very different journeys begin to intersect, each revealing a side of fame we rarely talk about. Stay with us, because this is not a story about blame. It is a story about consequences, reflection, and resilience. The passing of Wu Monglung marked more than the loss of a familiar face on screen. It created a silence that felt unfinished, not because answers were missing, but because understanding takes longer than facts. Time, in this case, has not softened public attention. Instead, it has sharpened it. As days turned into months, grief gradually transformed into reflection, and reflection into questions. Not accusatory questions, but human ones. How did this happen? Could something have been different? What does this say about the pressures behind the scenes? What keeps this story alive is not speculation alone, but emotional residue. Wu Monglung's career, though not without challenges, represented perseverance within a demanding industry. His absence forces audiences to confront the reality that success does not always equal safety, nor visibility equal protection. In many ways, his story has become symbolic. It speaks to the quiet exhaustion that often goes unnoticed, the internal battles that rarely make headlines, and the cost of carrying expectations without pause. This is why the story refuses to end. It has moved beyond an individual narrative and entered a collective consciousness, a reminder that some endings are not meant to close discussions, but to open deeper conversations about care, responsibility, and the unseen weight of public life. For Tong Yinan, recent attention has carried a very different emotional texture. It has not been celebratory, nor directly confrontational, but persistent, the kind of attention that lingers and slowly reshapes perception. In the digital age, memory is selective but unforgiving. Past moments, once insignificant, can resurface stripped of their original context. When this happens, the individual involved often loses control of their own narrative, becoming instead a subject of interpretation. What makes this burden particularly heavy is its ambiguity. There are no clear accusations, no definitive conclusions, only suggestion, repetition, and emotional projection from afar. This creates a psychological pressure that is difficult to respond to, because defending oneself against implication rather than fact is an exhausting task. Yet within this challenge lies a quieter possibility. Moments of scrutiny often force an internal reckoning. They create distance from noise and compel reflection on identity beyond public approval. For some, this becomes a breaking point. For others, a recalibration. Song Yiren's situation highlights how attention, when detached from empathy, can become destabilizing. At the same time, it reminds us that resilience is not always loud. Sometimes it is the choice to step back, regain balance, and allow time, rather than reaction, to shape the next chapter. The shift surrounding Hua Chenyu is defined less by action and more by atmosphere. There has been no dramatic turning point, no public confrontation. Instead, what audiences sense is a gradual thinning of presence, a subtle retreat from constant visibility. In an industry where relevance is often measured by exposure, absence invites interpretation. Some read it as rejection, others as withdrawal. Yet there is another, more measured way to view this moment, as a conscious repositioning. Sustained attention carries its own cost. Over time, the expectation to perform, explain, and remain accessible can erode the boundary between professional identity and personal space. Choosing distance, then, may not signal defeat, but preservation. Silence can function as protection. It allows for recalibration, for reassessment of priorities beyond immediate validation. Many artists reach a point where longevity matters more than momentum, and inner stability more than constant affirmation. Hua Chenyu's quieter phase reflects this tension between public demand and personal sustainability. Whether temporary or transformative, it illustrates a truth often overlooked, that stepping back can be an act of agency, not avoidance. In a world that equates presence with worth, choosing restraint becomes a powerful, if misunderstood, statement. When these narratives are viewed together, they reveal a pattern that extends far beyond individual circumstances. They expose the fragile structure beneath public success, one built on attention, expectation, and continuous evaluation. Fame amplifies everything. Achievement feels higher, but vulnerability cuts deeper. The margin for error narrows, while the demand for resilience widens. Over time, this imbalance creates pressure that is rarely acknowledged until something breaks or quietly recedes. What resonates with audiences is not scandal, but recognition. Recognition that visibility does not equal invincibility. That behind carefully managed images are individuals navigating uncertainty, fatigue, and emotional strain. These stories prompt an uncomfortable but necessary reflection. How quickly admiration can turn into scrutiny, and how easily distance forms between public consumption and human consequence. Yet there is also a constructive dimension to this awareness. When stories are told with restraint and care, they invite empathy rather than judgment. They remind viewers that accountability and compassion are not opposing forces, but complementary ones. Ultimately, the human cost of fame is not paid all at once. It accumulates in silence, in pressure, in moments unseen. Recognizing this does not diminish responsibility, but it deepens understanding. And understanding is where meaningful change begins. Perhaps the most important question is not what went wrong, but what comes next. For those involved, the future remains unwritten. And for us as viewers, this is a moment to practice empathy over assumption, patience over judgment. Because sometimes the most powerful transformation happens quietly. Thank you for watching and staying with us until the end. If you appreciate thoughtful updates, calm analysis, and stories that go beyond the headlines, please subscribe to Update X24H and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next video. Your support helps us continue delivering content that informs, reflects, and connects. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and we'll see you again on Update X24H.